Eli Carter stumbled backward from the rusted storm doors behind the house, his breath cutting sharp and uneven through the mist-thick October air. The hinges had shrieked like a dying animal when he wrenched them open, revealing a yawning black void beneath the rotted porch. The basement, cold exhaled from it, unnatural, dry as bone. "Go on then," Zeke shouted from the gate, his voice thick with beer and teenage bravado. $10 if you go all the way to the furnace and back." Eli gave a shaky laugh, half hiding his nerves. "You Venmo that first." He descended the first creaking steps. His flashlight flickered once, then steadied. The air felt wrong, thicker. He thought he heard something. No, someone, sighing in the shadows. The town had long whispered about this house, the dead grass that never grew, the flies that nested in the windows, the realtor who vanished midsummer after holding an open house no one remembered attending. But teenagers don't believe in whispers, not until they start screaming. The moment Eli's sneakers touched the concrete floor, the sound shifted. It was like the walls inhaled. His light cut across something hunched in the far corner, where the brick curved unnaturally, almost like a second wall had grown there, veined with soot and claw marks. Something moved. The flashlight hit the floor, skittering, spinning, and caught something, a face too pale, hands too long. It rushed him. Zeke never saw Eli again, just a flood of screaming and the basement door snapping shut. Dex Harrow hadn't heard the rumors. He hadn't been warned by a trembling neighbor or stumbled across ominous threads in forgotten online forums. There were no foreboding dreams, no gut instincts, no ghostly apparitions in mirrors. There was just a number. $24,000, that's what sealed it. It wasn't even listed long. A single grainy photo showed a brooding, weather-worn Victorian crouched on a lot half-eaten by weeds. Charming fixer-upper, the description had promised. Unique character, immediate possession, sold as is. Dex clicked, schedule showing. No one ever showed him around. The realtor never responded after confirming the appointment. The key was taped to the mailbox when he arrived. That should have been the first red flag. But Dex had been living in a cramped studio apartment 3 towns over, his life compressed into a dented coffee table and a futon that smelled like cold takeout. So when he parked in front of 47 Widow Lane and saw the sagging gables and the dead tree creaking in the front yard, he didn't see danger, he saw potential. The porch groaned under his boots as he stepped up to the door, ivy coiling around the pillars like grasping fingers. He took a slow breath. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rust or blood left too long in the sun. He ignored it. "I could make this a home," he whispered, slipping the key into the lock. The doorknob turned with a reluctant click, and the door swung open into shadow. Dust motes floated in shafts of afternoon light slicing through the grimy windows. The interior was cold, much colder than it should have been. His breath fogged in front of him, and his fingers stung from the sudden chill. He smiled anyway. Wide archways, tall ceilings, ornate molding caked in years of grime. The place had bones, beautiful, broken, waiting to be resurrected bones. He wandered room to room, mentally calculating costs. Paint, drywall, maybe hire someone to check the furnace, assuming it had one that hadn't exploded. The house creaked around him as he walked. The floorboards whispered secrets to one another beneath the dust. Something shifted in the walls behind the staircase, a soft thump, then silence. Dex paused, head tilted. Old pipes, he thought. Settling wood, a squirrel in the attic. He moved on. In the kitchen, he ran a hand over the counter. The surface was oddly warm, just one patch right near the sink. He pulled his hand away and flexed his fingers, a shiver running up his spine. There was no working fridge, no curtains, no furniture, just a lingering weight in the air, like the house had been holding its breath for a long, long time. Then he saw it. The basement door. It was nestled in a narrow hallway off the kitchen, almost hidden. Faded red paint clung to its surface like dried skin. A single antique knob, tarnished and loose. It was closed, mostly, but not quite. Dex noticed, only distantly, that the door stood open, a thin crack. Not enough to see anything beyond it, just a thin sliver of black. He didn't approach it, not yet. He'd explore later, he told himself, after he settled in, after he unpacked, after the place felt less like a tomb and more like a blank canvas. The next morning, he would find it open wider. And the day after that, it would be ajar. And then, one night, it would be wide open, waiting. But for now, Dex turned his back to the basement door and smiled at the emptiness of the house. He was finally home. Millward Hollow wasn't on any tourist map, a wrinkle in the countryside tucked between dead cornfields and cracked highways, the kind of place you passed through without stopping. One gas station, one diner, a single stoplight that had been stuck blinking red for 5 years. Dex parked in front of the diner late one morning, his boots crunching gravel as he stepped out. He needed coffee, maybe groceries, maybe a conversation with someone who didn't come with whispering walls and creaking rafters. The bell above the door jingled weakly as he stepped inside. Silence. Every head in the diner turned to him, eyes flat, faces lined. One man, gray beard, tobacco-stained cap, stopped chewing mid-bite. Dex gave a polite nod and shuffled to the counter. The woman behind it, a thick-armed waitress with sun-dried skin and eyes like wet pebbles, poured coffee without a word. "You knew?" she asked, not looking at him. "Yeah," Dex said. "Just bought the place over on Widow Lane." The spoon in her hand clattered against the counter. The man in the cap stood up and walked out without finishing his plate. No one said anything. Dex forced a chuckle. "Bad plumbing or something?" The waitress finally looked at him, her lips pressed into a line. "You bought that house?" He nodded. "Starting renovations soon, needs work." "Don't bother with the basement," she said, and then she turned, vanishing through the swinging door into the kitchen. Dex sat in the silence that followed, coffee going cold. Outside, he swore he saw someone standing across the street, just watching, not moving. When he blinked, they were gone. That evening, Dex tried to meet more people. The local hardware store, empty. The grocer barely grunted at him. A boy no older than 10 stared wide-eyed from a bike and whispered something to his friend before they both rode off fast in the opposite direction. It was like the town shared a secret he wasn't allowed to know. Later that night, Dex sat in the living room of his new house with the lights off. He couldn't stop thinking about the waitress's voice. "Don't bother with the basement." He hadn't opened it yet, not fully, but tonight the door was wide open. And something was breathing at the bottom of the stairs. The man's name was Reuben Pitts, furnace technician, late 50s, smelled like motor oil and menthols. He didn't talk much, just showed up at 9 a.m. sharp with a red toolbox in one hand and a grease-smudged clipboard in the other. Dex was relieved to see someone else in the house. For days, it had been too quiet. No matter what room he stood in, he felt watched, followed, like the corners of the house bent toward him just slightly when he wasn't looking. Reuben gave the place one squint and said, "Old bones. Then basement?" Dex pointed down the hallway. Reuben's boots thudded with certainty. He didn't hesitate. He yanked the basement door open with one creak and started down the stairs without so much as a pause. The chain Dex had started keeping across the door clinked against the frame. "Let me know if you need anything," Dex called after him. There was no answer, just the thump of descending footsteps. And then silence. Dex waited at the top of the steps for a minute, arms crossed. The chill rolling out of the basement made his nose sting. He rubbed his arms. The door hadn't been this cold yesterday. Another minute passed. "Everything good down there?" Dex called. No reply. A full 3 minutes went by before Dex tried again, voice louder this time. "Reuben?" The silence was total now. No clanking of tools, no metallic hammering, no footsteps, just the breathless hush of something vast and hidden, like a cave swallowing sound whole. He took one step down. "Reuben?" His voice hit the concrete walls and went nowhere. Dex peered into the darkness, hand on the railing, but couldn't see far. The light bulb down there, he could have sworn it worked earlier, was now dead, its filament cold and blackened. He flicked the switch back and forth. Nothing. Dex's stomach tightened. He turned back, walking away faster than he meant to. He didn't know what he was afraid of, but it was thick, almost tangible, like a pressure in the bones of the house. Reuben didn't come back up. By noon, Dex had paced the entire house 3 times. He called the number on the work order, left a message, checked outside for Reuben's truck, still parked across the street, empty. By 3 p.m., the truck was gone. Dex hadn't heard it start. The next morning, Dex checked the basement again. There was no sign Reuben had ever been there. No tools, no clipboard, no boot prints in the faint layer of dust on the concrete. Just the strange metallic smell, like rust and something older, deeper. He told himself Reuben must have left and forgotten to say goodbye. Maybe he got annoyed and bailed. Maybe he needed a part. But Dex knew that wasn't right. Because that night he found one of Reuben's work gloves on the kitchen table. He hadn't left it there. And it was wet. The local paper didn't run obituaries. It ran notices. Local handyman missing since Tuesday. Real estate agent fails to return to office. Boiler technician's truck found abandoned. No follow-up articles, no search parties, just thin, polite lines printed beside ads for pumpkin festivals and bake sales, and still no one talked about it. Dex started noticing gaps. The woman who owned the flower shop on the corner closed early one day and never reopened. Her sign still hung crooked in the window, wilting bouquets sagging inside. No one took the flowers out. No one swept up the petals. The grocery store's cashier, the tall one with the lazy eye and the bandage across her thumb, gone, just gone. A new woman stood in her place the following week, smiling too much. Her name tag read Susan, but when Dex asked how long she'd lived in Millward Hollow, her grin froze like wax. "Long enough," she said. "We don't talk about sad things here." Then she blinked, once, twice, and turned away. Dex stood in the cereal aisle for a long time after that, staring down at a box of Raisin Bran like it had whispered something. At night, he dreamed of tunnels. Dark ones, wet and breathing, He'd wake up in a cold sweat with dirt beneath his fingernails, the echo of dripping still in his ears. Once he woke up on the bathroom floor, shirt soaked, socks gone. He didn't remember how he'd gotten there. That night, he bolted the basement door shut, and then placed a chair against it, and then pushed the fridge over until it blocked the frame entirely. Still, the next morning, the door was open again. The next disappearance shook him. It was the kid next door, Liam, maybe 10 years old. Used to ride his bike in figure eights out front, wheels squeaking every turn. Dex had waved to him once. Liam hadn't waved back, just stared. Then one morning, the sidewalk was empty. The front door of Liam's house stood wide open, wind pushing the screen back and forth with a thunk, thunk, thunk. Cereal spilled across the porch like someone had dropped a bowl mid-run. The sheriff showed up. Just one car, just one man. Dex watched from his window as the sheriff stepped inside, looked around, and then calmly shut the door behind him. Nobody asked questions. Nobody knocked. Liam's house went dark the next day. Dex began to feel something shifting inside himself. When he passed mirrors, he paused longer, searching his face, his eyes. There was something buried behind his stare now, something he didn't recognize, a pull toward the dark, toward down. The dreams got worse. He would wake up with bruises around his ankles like he'd been dragged. His shoes were often damp, left at the foot of the stairs, even though he swore he'd left them in the hall. The house creaked more often now, but only at night, only when the moon was full, only when he thought of Reuben. Something was wrong in the town, but something was worse in the house. And worst of all, Dex couldn't look at the basement door anymore without feeling hungry. The sound came again, a hollow scrape like fingernails on concrete. Dex froze. He was in the kitchen, a half-empty mug of black coffee in his hand, staring down at the floor vent beneath the sink. The sound had come from there, below, not just from the basement anymore, lower. He bent down slowly, mug trembling slightly. The vent was loose, the screws rusted through, a faint smell wafted out, earthy and rank, like wet soil and something decaying far too slowly. He pried the vent cover off, cold air breathed into his face. And then he saw them, tiny tracks in the dust. Not animal, not quite human either. Fingers too long, nails too pointed, as if something had been crawling up from the ducts and back down again. He dropped the vent cover and backed away. That night, Dex walked the perimeter of the house, flashlight in hand, too restless to sleep, too wired to sit still. The town was silent. No street lights here, just the pale blue of moonlight brushing over fences and rooftops. He knelt beside the foundation and found it, a small grate in the side of the house, rusted through, half covered in weeds. It led under the basement, a crawl space. The metal was bent outward. Something had come out. He couldn't sleep. Instead, he paced. Every sound in the house became amplified. The ticking of the clock pulsed like a heartbeat. The floor groaned beneath his steps as though straining to hold something beneath. And always, always, that faint scratching, sometimes in the vents, sometimes in the walls, and sometimes just behind him. When Dex passed by the hall closet that night, he caught something in his peripheral vision. A shape crouched just behind the coats. He flung the door open. Nothing, just hangers swaying slightly as though recently disturbed. By morning, he was shaking. He drove, aimless, searching, needing answers no one in town would give him. But as he passed the old church, he saw something that made his stomach churn. A manhole in the center of the road, its cover askew. a jagged smear of something dark trailing from it, leading toward the curb. A police officer stood 10 feet away, staring at it with dead eyes. Dex slowed his car. The officer looked up at him and smiled. But the smile was wrong, too long, too wide. There was dirt beneath his nails and something wet at the corner of his mouth. Dex sped away without stopping. That night, Dex opened the basement door and stood at the top of the stairs for what felt like hours, listening. It wasn't just a basement. He knew that now. There were tunnels beneath this house, old ones. Something had carved them out like veins beneath the earth, worming through dirt and brick and town. The town itself was built on top of something that moved, something that fed, and somehow, some part of him was beginning to understand it. It started with the mirror, the one above the sink in the upstairs hallway. A simple thing, oval, dusty, cracked in the lower left corner. Dex passed it every day, never looked twice, until one morning it moved, not the mirror itself, his reflection. He had just woken from another dream, half-dressed, half-conscious, stomach sick from the smell of damp soil that clung to him more each night. He paused in front of the mirror to check his eyes, to remind himself he was still him, and then his reflection blinked first. Dex stumbled back, knocking over a lamp. Glass shattered. The mirror returned to normal. But it was too late. Something had shifted. Later, he found muddy footprints in the upstairs hall. Not boot prints, bare, thin, spindly. The steps were wrong, almost knuckled, like something had crawled along the floor, half human, half spider. They trailed up the wall, across the ceiling, and vanished through the open attic vent. Dex shut the vent, nailed it closed. But the next morning, it was open again. The hammer was on the floor, bent in half. He stopped sleeping. The gaps in his memory grew larger. He'd wake with dirt in his teeth, nails chipped, shirt shredded like he'd clawed at something underground. Once, he woke in the shower, fully clothed, water running ice cold. Another time, he woke in the sewers. Not a dream. His hands were raw, his knees scraped. Rats hissed and darted past as he crawled up through a drainage grate 2 blocks from his house. His mouth was full of something coppery. He vomited behind a gas station. There was a child's shoelace in his pocket. Dex tried to journal it, anything to ground himself. October 3rd, heard something under the floor again. Vents cold, lights flickering, something wrong with my eyes. I don't remember getting dressed today. October 6th, saw a woman crying in front of Liam's house. She didn't notice me. I couldn't stop staring at her throat. October 9th, went down into the basement again. Thought I saw Reuben in the corner, but it wasn't him. It had my face. October 13th, there's something in the walls, or maybe it's me. He stopped writing after that. The mirror began whispering. The next time Dex blacked out, it lasted hours. He came to standing in front of his own basement door, shirt soaked, feet muddy, fingertips aching. Something sharp was in his hand, a rusted garden trowel. Fresh soil clung to the metal, bits of something, fabric, hair. He dropped it and screamed, not out of fear, out of recognition, because somewhere deep in his chest, something stirred, something old, familiar, something that liked the feeling of digging, of clawing through earth, of dragging warm bodies into cold crawl spaces. And then he remembered something. A town before this one, a house, a locked door, a trap door, and the smell. Dex stared at his reflection again that night, shaking. "I'm not it," he whispered. "I'm not it. I'm not." But the mirror didn't nod. It smiled. By the end of October, the town began to shrink. One by one, the homes went quiet. Porches unlit, mailboxes untouched, curtains never shifting. There were no police reports, no nightly news segments, just absences, swallowed whole like the town was being erased from the inside out. Dex drove the roads some nights, hoping to see life, hoping not to see what he was starting to suspect, that the only light still burning belonged to him. And maybe the gas station, but the man inside never moved. The blackouts grew longer. He'd come to with blood on his hands, teeth aching like he'd bitten down too hard, his bones cracked in places that should never shift. His reflection no longer flinched when he looked at it, because it wasn't entirely his anymore. The claws were the first thing he noticed. Not fingernails, claws, thin and black and hooked like fishbone, curling from the tips of his fingers when the blackout ended. They scraped the tile when he walked barefoot. They retracted slowly over hours, sinking beneath the skin, leaving red crescents behind like scars from inside out. Then came the eyes. Not always, just flashes. A mirror passed too fast. A puddle on the street, yellowed, animalistic, no iris, no soul, just a slitted black center like a cat glimpsing firelight, and they blinked sideways. That week he woke under a porch, curled, shivering, muzzle soaked, his shirt torn clean down the back. His spine moved wrong, like it had split and restitched itself. He couldn't stand right for 2 days. His jaw ached like he'd unhinged it, and somewhere behind him in the dark beneath that porch, he smelled blood and hair and the distant iron stench of bone. He didn't look back. He already knew what was there. He knew the name on the mailbox. Liam's mother. The town pretended it always had. Dex saw that now. This place didn't deny the horrors. It absorbed them, accepted them, the way rot quietly seeps into fruit. The neighbors smiled too hard, walked too quickly, and avoided his eyes like their own truths might bleed out if they stared too long. The man at the post office gave him a free box of stamps with shaking hands. The church locked its doors even on Sundays. And the gas station guy finally spoke. Just one sentence. "You should have left when it was still you." That night, Dex peeled open the floorboards of his basement. He didn't use tools. His hands knew what to do. Beneath the wood, the dirt was warm, alive almost. It pulsed beneath his palms. The tunnel mouth waited, carved by hands that didn't belong to men, walls slick with moisture, a path that led deep, deep down beneath the town to where the old ones writhed and remembered. And he remembered too, another town, another house, another life, another Dex. Each time he moved, he forgot. Each time he forgot, something else woke up in his place. In the mirror now, he saw it clearly. The hunched shape, the jaw unhinging, teeth layered in rows, twitching like centipede legs, claws dragging against brick, the eyes a flat sheen of yellow and black, long limbs twisted and sinewy as though built for crawling, not walking. No skin, just stretched flesh over bone and hunger, not Dex anymore, not entirely. But somewhere, in the very back of that monster's throat, a scream still lived, muffled, mournful, like Dex was buried alive inside himself. He didn't know where he'd go next, but his house was up for sale again. And in the dark crawl spaces beneath Millward Hollow, something hissed through the pipes, traveling the sewers, sniffing out new towns, new basements, new names to forget. Millward Hollow's autumns were always too quiet, the kind of quiet that made the trees sound suspicious when they creaked in the wind. That made your footsteps feel like you were waking something up just by existing. The for sale sign outside 103 Barrow Street flapped in the breeze. It hadn't been there yesterday, but now it stood proudly in the dry brown lawn. White paint, red letters, a fresh flyer clipped beneath the arm. The photo showed a cozy old house with a sprawling porch, new windows, and lots of character printed in 2 cheerful type. A handwritten scribble at the bottom read, "Motivated seller, recently renovated basement." Olivia Moore stepped out of her car, phone in hand, scanning the empty block. She was 28, divorced, tired of cities and noise and people who didn't say hello. This small town felt like a restart. She hadn't planned to move here, just saw the listing at 2 a.m. during a restless scroll. The ad had no price, no contact, just an address, coordinates, and a grainy photo that made her feel something she couldn't explain. And now here she was. Something about the house pulled at her, a strange kind of magnetism, as if it had waited for her. She stepped up to the porch. The air was cool, still. There was no lock on the door, just a brass knob that turned too easily, as if freshly oiled. The door creaked open into a perfectly still living room, dustless, empty, waiting. She wandered through, fascinated. It wasn't just the charm, it was the feeling. Like memory lived in the walls, like stories breathed through the floorboards, like someone had loved this house, or tried to. When she reached the basement door, she paused. It wasn't fear, it was curiosity, laced with something warm and oddly familiar. She turned the knob. The door creaked open to the dark. The first 2 steps were visible. After that, shadows, thick and swallowing, but there was something else. A faint, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing, not hers. She flipped the switch. Nothing, but something moved at the bottom of the stairs. She leaned forward, squinting. That's when she saw it, etched faintly into the wall beside the door, carved in jagged letters by something not quite human. Don't remember, don't dig. Outside, the town continued on. A curtain closed across the street. A black dog howled from somewhere far off. The sewer grate by the sidewalk trembled, then clicked shut, and in the darkness of the basement, the house exhaled. Something very old and very hungry had come home.